Hello and welcome to Chapter 1, Part 1 video notes. Here's the deal. I'm going to go through the most important slides that I can think of. I'm not going to go word for word with your class notes, but everything I say is going to follow the class notes. So you can have them on you. It would be a good idea, but don't expect me to go through each one. I'm going to go very fast. If I go too fast, remember you can always pause me. Let's start with Native Americans, guys. If we're doing American history, we got to talk about the first Americans, the Native Americans. All right, well, number one, how did they get here? They got here going over what scientists believe was a land bridge called Beringia. It connects Alaska to Russia today, but you can't find it today because it was around during the Ice Age. Now, if you think about this, if you look at this little map down here, going from the land bridge down here would bring you to Asia. So scientists believe Native Americans today are actually descendants of individuals from Asia. All right, let's go through a couple of tribes, a couple of very key tribes. First one I want to talk about is the Cherokee. The Cherokee were in the southeast. I'm talking about North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. Georgia is the key to know about the Cherokee. The Cherokee were known as being farmers, hunters, and fishers, okay? Fishermen and fisherwomen. The Algonquin and the Iroquois, the next two groups I want to speak of, you've got to understand they are connected by language. Language is the key. If you speak an Algonquin language, you are an Algonquin. If you speak an Iroquoian language, you are an Iroquois. The Iroquois were a group of 5 tribes that formed together to make the Iroquois Confederacy. All right, so we've got some Native Americans. Let's talk about exploration from the Europeans. Well, why do they want to get there? They wanted to get there because they wanted to get sugars, spices, and silks from the Middle East, or from the Far East, I should say. Well, how do they know about these? They learned from the Crusades. When the Crusades, we have our Europeans. We have our Muslims. So it's Christian Muslim. They meet in the Crusades. They fight. But they also begin to trade. They learn of these very, very valuable items. Like I said, sugar, spices, and silks. So they say, let's go find them. Columbus says, I know how to find them. I'll find them by sailing west. Because if I go west, I'll go actually east. I'll go all the way around the globe. Instead, he bumped into the Americas. It was like a brick wall. It was like a barrier preventing Columbus from going to where he really wanted to go. He went another 2 times, never gaining what he had hoped, which was the far riches of the East. And then everyone kind of left it alone. A key about Columbus is that he was Italian, but he was actually sailing for the Spanish. So Spain gets to the New World first, but it's just a brick wall, it's a barrier. No one wants nothing to do with it until this guy. Say hello to Hernan Cortez. Cortez was from Spain also. Cortez says, you know what, I'm going to go back there. I'm going to see if I can make a lot of money out of that area. And that's exactly what he does. Cortez crushes the Aztec Empire when he comes into the Americas. And he crushes them with superior weapons, with disease. Disease is the key. See, this disease, there's no immunities, there's no resistance to the disease for the Native Americans. Europeans already had resistances, but with battle and with disease, Cortez takes over the former Aztec Empire and it becomes New Spain. So Spain's really dominating, right? Spain found the Americas with Columbus, and now Cortez has taken a good chunk and called it New Spain. Well, Spain's not the only European power that gets involved. 1673, New France jumps on. Now, New France, if I said there was a brick wall, they wanted to find their way through the brick wall. They wanted to find the Northwest Passage. There's just one problem. There is no Northwest Passage. Today it's called the Panama Canal, but it wasn't around then. So they got to the New World and said, we got to make some money, and they found a way to make money, and that was what you see right here in this photo through the fur trade. And you got to trade with Native Americans. So that means you really should be nice to the people you're trading with. You can't punch them in the face and say, now give me that. Well, I guess you could, but New France didn't have the manpower, they didn't have the weaponry. Also, if they're going to get some furs, they're going to need permission to hunt those lands. This is France and the Native Americans coming together. So the key is that New France, they have better relations with Native Americans than Spain does because Cortez is just killing them all. Columbian Exchange. Columbian Exchange means old world to new world. Next time you're having dinner, next time you're having a white mocha from Starbucks, keep in mind there's coffee and there's chocolate. Keep in mind that's old world and new world. All sorts of things we enjoy today are either old world or new world. But one thing that we do not enjoy is disease. Take a look at this image. This image is representing a European with a disease, smallpox in this case. It ain't the best drawing in the world, folks. This European gives this Native American disease. The Native American slowly dies. Okay? Very important to know. This isn't germ warfare. This is not a case where the Europeans came and went, hey, would you like this napkin? No. Disease spread because Native Americans didn't have the resistance, the Europeans did, all right? It wasn't intentional, but it was dramatic and deadly. One might say the most deadly effect of the Columbian Exchange was disease, all right? All right, so we talked a little about Native Americans. We talked a little about Europeans, but we have not talked about the British, and the British are important, so let's talk about them. First things first, the first first British permanent colony, which is Jamestown. You're looking at the seal of the Virginia Company of London. So important. Everybody likes to think like the king just said, I'd like a colony, so give me one. No, a company, a business, a corporation said, we'd like a colony, so king, do we have permission? The king says you have permission. So is the Virginia Company of London. First things first is to find the gold. You know, the gold in Virginia. Everybody sees it. You trip over it a lot. It's really at intersections of roads. The gold will bubble out, that gold. That's right. There's no gold in Virginia. So Jamestown was doing horribly at first until a certain crop became like gold. That would be tobacco. Tobacco saved Virginia. It was grown by a guy named John Rolfe. He was the one who brought it over. With tobacco, Virginia's making money. They wanted it with gold. Tobacco actually did work. But it's hard work to grow tobacco fields. So these planters, these rich Jamestown tobacco gurus, turned to two forms of cheap labor. Form number one was indentured servitude. You bring some poor guy from Europe over to the New World. You pay for his trip. Yay. You're such a nice guy. Except he has to work for you for 7 years. After 7 years, he's in America. Remember, the Americas. He's in the British colonies. He can buy his own land. He's free. But you got him for 7 years. Indentured servitude was one way. The other way was to turn to Africans. Notice I did not say slavery. I just said Africans. Africans were brought over in 1619, and they were treated as indentured servants. But later, there's going to be a switch to the use of slavery. So the two forms, when it's all said and done, are going to be indentured servants and slaves, because the first Africans will become slaves with the subsequent amounts of Africans that come in as enslaved Africans. All right, let's talk about government real quick. The House of Burgesses. The House of Burgesses was the first elected legislature in North America. This is where people got together, representative government, said what they thought represented themselves. The Virginia Company of London said, yes, you can do it. And you will call it the House of Burgesses. Is it around today? Mr. Spicer? Yeah. And it's called the General Assembly. The Virginia General Assembly is in Richmond today, folks, and maybe you will be serving as our delegate in the General Assembly. All right, so that's great. Life is good. Oh no! 1622 Jamestown Massacre. Native Americans decided to push back a little bit. 350 Jamestown colonists are dead. And then we feel especially bad for this guy because he doesn't even know what's coming. Why? Why was this fighting happening? Because of land. Because more colonists came to Jamestown. Remember, it was making money. More colonists need their space, so they get land. Only problem is that land already belongs to Native Americans. So when those two forces come together, they fight, okay? Colonists did attack Native Americans. Native Americans did attack colonists because they're fighting for land. Land is the key, all right? All right, let's get out of Virginia for a bit. Let's talk about Maryland. Maryland was established by a guy named George Calvert, otherwise known as Lord Baltimore. Get it? Baltimore, Maryland? Great. Maryland was established as a colony for Catholics. Think about Mary Land. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is a very, very central teaching of the Catholic Church. So the Catholics are in Maryland. Maryland, Catholics. How about, let's go way up north to the Puritans. Puritans on the Mayflower is 1620. They were floating over. Who were they? They were a religious group of people in England who wanted the Church of England to go so far away from the Catholic Church, to have no traces. They wanted to purify it of any Catholicism, and they weren't happy. They weren't happy in England. Let's try to do it in the New World. So they sail on the Mayflower. On the Mayflower, they write the Mayflower Compact. That is a covenant, meaning a promise to themselves for how they will act once they arrive in the New World. It was also a form of government. So much like the House of Burgesses, the Mayflower Compact is a form of government. Okay, they were not tolerant, which is kind of ironic. Because remember, no one really liked them because they were different. They were the ones criticizing the majority for being too Catholic. But if you were different than them, they weren't so much a fan of you. Actually, an example of this would be the Salem witch trials. It's kind of a loose example, but over 20 Puritans in Massachusetts were accused of being witches, and the Salem witch trials happened as partially a reason because of the intolerance. Here's a better example. Roger Williams is crazy. He wants to do crazy things. He wanted to pay Native Americans for land. He also had different views for Puritans. This crazy view led the Puritans to say, hey, Roger Williams, pack your bags, get out of here. He actually went on a road and he escaped to Rhode Island. You see, Rhode Island is a colony for dissenters. Dissenters are people who think differently. So if you look at the map, if this is Massachusetts, Puritans, 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 Mayflower, 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 Covenant, 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 but they're a little intolerant. They kicked Roger Williams and he escaped to this little tiny colony today. It's the tiniest state, and it is Rhode Island. The one next door, it's Connecticut. All right, last one, William Penn. William Penn is a Quaker. Quakers get their names because they say they quake at the voice of God. Very religious. Also, pacifists. Pacifists means they are anti-war. Okay, so think love, not war, when we think about our Quakers. So, if the Puritans were intolerant, but then we have these really passive Quaker guys, then the Quakers are going to be tolerant. Now, William Penn, he gets a lot of land because he was rich and he was connected. So when the king gives him land, what would they name it? How about Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania, which is a middle colony, is for Quakers, and it's very accepting, it's very diverse, and it is tolerant, whereas Puritan Massachusetts was intolerant. All right? Beautiful. That wraps it up for part 1. Part 2, I would highly recommend you watch. Hit those class notes. Do all your homework, ask me for questions, and good luck on the test.